Hey, how's it, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Freedom FANatics. My name is Alex, and today I've got my awesome colleagues, Sherlyn from Cape Town and Tiejo from a very hot Polokwane. Welcome, gents. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks,
Hey,
Alex.
hey, Alex.
Awesome. Okay, lads. So today we're going to be talking about we're gonna switch things up a bit. We're going to start with our news item this week, which is actually a sort of a mini documentary that I came across in EWN, and it is a video documentary about a community on the east rand of Johannesburg, just outside Boksburg. Um, called Reiger Park. We've had the privilege of chatting to some reps from Reiger Park. Shonen has been interviewed by Justice, who heads up the Reiger Bulletin, very
Yeah.
awesome little community newspaper. Shonen, before we jump into the video, what's your experience been like with chatting to Justice and residents of Reiger Park?
Yeah, man. It was always a privilege being able to join them on the platform, especially getting to find out, some of the issues that they face
Mm,
in their community, and many of it is the same as a lot of the rest of us do.
mm,
Like lack of resources, um, low safety and security, struggling with unemployment. Those are things that
mm,
they have been enduring, and yet they remain like a resilient group of people, especially with regards to, them creating their own bulletin, which is a platform where they share information and not really necessarily relying on outside sources, but
mm.
getting together and, taking the initiative to inform one another about things happening in the community. And that was a really good experience being with him. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the story that this little documentary highlights is quite a sad one. I mean, it's about two young boys who went off, I think, after school and to a nearby mine dump site and got caught in a landfill in a sort of a kind of lake that sort of trapped them in it. And unfortunately, they later drowned. So this is the sort of precursor to this uh, story. So we're going to watch two or so minutes, and then we'll jump into it and discuss it a little bit.
Incident has raised a number of concerns faced by the Reiger Park community. They believe that should these challenges be addressed adequately, tragedies such as the death of little children doing something as innocent as playing near their homes will be prevented.
The wall needs to be erected ASAP. Okay. In every area, there is space for for a parking thing. So they need to have slides put up here in the flats as well. If you go on the other side, the grass is so long. We might be just people that have been forgotten by government. What is the only option they have? The only option is to take the risk of going and adventure this place. They go and adventure what is actually happening there, and many times they don't come back. I just believe that council has to take full responsibility. The mine has to take full responsibility of the health of the people of the site. At the end of the day, we need people to come out. We need the premier actually to come out and see in what condition we live here. It's about time that they start doing what they have to do, because every year it's the same thing: promises that has never been fulfilled.
Once the election is over, then it's forgotten until the next election or the next race, I would say. And it's so sad because we cannot do that to communities. Currently, we're looking at the illegal connections. where there's schools. I mean, there's young ones, as young as 6 years. You send your child to school, and your child, by accident, steps on that illegal connections. What then? Just another case again? Just another life lost? I would really plead to the necessary authorities then to step up their game in terms of safety and security. I feel there's people that gets paid for services that they don't render.
All right, guys. So I think let's leave it there. I mean, we could go on forever. I mean, it's a very sad story, but we don't mean to be a platform of doom and gloom. But I think what's I think so striking about the story, it really is that you really could take a place, take a name, and it could be anywhere in the country. We see this all over the country, and I mean, the one thing I want to jump into, the gentleman in the interview, Tiago Peter Basson, he says we might just be people that have been forgotten by the government. You've worked in communities in the Eastern Cape. What are your thoughts on Peter's comment there?
Well, I think it's tragic that we have come to a point whereby citizens feel that they have been forsaken by the government, and of course, this is not a unique story. It's like you said, it's a story that's familiar all over South Africa. You come down to Limpopo, I think it must have been in 2014, whereby we lost a life of a 7-year-old Michael Komape, who fell into a pit toilet at school. In the Eastern Cape as well, we have had such instances whereby young people have fallen either into lakes or into toilets and have died, all because the government has neglected them and has neglected delivering services and providing proper infrastructure to communities. So I think it's tragic that we are where we are. And yeah, I hope that as time goes, citizens can take back their power from the government and begin to do things themselves. And yeah, we move in that fashion.
I mean, Charlotte, in the video, I mean, they chat to the councillor, who I believe is affiliated with the Patriotic Alliance, and we see they did quite well in the recent elections, particularly in predominantly coloured areas, and often people from those areas, of course. The one thing she mentions is that, you know, she cites government officials as being obviously complicit in this whole failure to protect its citizens, to serve its citizens. And I believe she's recently taken office. And the one thing I think she later mentions in the video is that, you know, she's got 27 years of maybe 27 is a bit harsh, but she's got at least a decade's worth of cleaning up to do. And I mean, now that we're going into an era of coalition politics and all the rest, you know, it is at least people voting in somebody from the community a sort of proactive first step to hopefully solving some of the issues that Reiger Park faces.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Alex. That we actually start, you know, identifying. There's a lot of leaders, especially in the Reiger Park, as we've seen, that, you know, understand the needs of the community, understands the heart of the community, and, you know, actually already active participants inside of the communities in which they want to become leaders. And I think that's important because something we see, especially when it comes to coalitions, right now, is even a good example is the way the major political parties are going into an argument of he said, she said, with each other, and, you know, having to sort out personal differences. But in the meantime, there are communities like Reiger Park that are struggling to get basic services fixed and, you know, attended to. And that's why I also believe that this is a good example of why communities need to state-proof themselves, where they need to begin actually taking responsibility for their water management, for the sewage management, for cleaning up their communities and providing safety and security, even if it's through neighborhood watches.
No, absolutely. I think it's awesome that you touch on some solutions, because it's actually quite difficult to imagine where do you start. And this is where we bring in this week's sort of fan article of the week, which was written by an old colleague of ours, Tariq Khan, and his piece basically, his piece is titled "Communities Embrace Self-Reliance Over Government Dependence," on government rather. And he goes on to cites 4 examples of where communities have taken back control, or at least tried to solve some instance of service delivery failure. He cites a story from Harry Smith with some water issues they have. Same also water issues within Gauteng Rivier, I believe in the northwest. But I think the central thesis that Tariq touches on is that people have lost faith in the government to deal with their problems. But Tioko, the one thing that I worry about here is that, not South Africa necessarily descending into an anarchic state, but that the structure of local governance, and you've campaigned to be a local councillor, is, can we restore faith in local governance structures, or is it going to be a thing of communities sort of isolating themselves and becoming entirely self-sufficient?
Well, I think we definitely can restore faith at the local government level. The only thing is that, remember, these people, politicians, are human beings. So now, even in terms of the faith that we do restore, it's never really that sustainable, because today you wake up with a mayor, for example, who genuinely cares about people and knows and understands what they are doing. Tomorrow you wake up with someone else who is clueless, parachuted into the position of becoming a mayor, knows nothing. And yeah, so I think that the best solution is really for people to begin doing these things for themselves and reducing the powers of governments at local government level, and allowing people to do most of these things themselves. The only thing would, of course, mean that you should scrap out some of the rates and services that people pay to local governments, municipalities, because these monies are meant for delivering services. And if services are not being delivered, people must deliver their own services. So then it's only fair that people don't pay for such services that they are delivering for themselves. But I do think that we must reduce government even at local level, and yeah, people should start doing these things themselves as much as it's possible.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be a bit of a patchwork job at the moment, and I mean, there's examples across, especially last year, tons of examples of local residents, as Tariq's article highlights, taking matters into their own hands and doing it in a very, as you say, withholding rates and taxes. There was a judgment recently against a community in the Northern Cape, where the court ordered them to stop fixing their own town. The reasons of which I can't exactly remember, but that's a very, very awkward kind of full circle where your government's not delivering, but on the one hand, it's communities also can't help themselves. But I mean, Sheldon, the one thing here is that the council in the Reiger Park example says that there are people that get paid for services that they don't render, and so these are people getting contracts, maybe in this example maybe to deal with illegal connections. It seems to be a big issue in that community. But I mean, let's look at the bigger picture for a moment before we jump into burning questions with Mbali. How do we link this to let's for a moment try and restore hope in democracy and governments, in that linking it to broader policy. How does something like cadre deployment, for example, which is a policy position that informs the hiring practices of the ANC, and that leaks then into government structures. How does something like that affect a community like Reiger Park, and why should they continue to hold government account, despite what their lived experience of urban decay is?
Yeah, something like that deployment definitely affects local communities, even because most of the tenders and contracts and even positions are not given to the best people capable for the job, but are actually given to the connected and who are the friends of these people making the decisions on contractors and so forth. And Alex, as you say, we at FAN, we believe in a limited government, a capable state. And that does not mean, and that means that we believe that government does have a role to play. But at the same time, it's exciting when hearing stories like in Tariq's article, when communities essentially begin building up educational facilities for themselves, and they manage sustainable water supplies and fix potholes even by themselves with limited resources. That's exciting stuff to actually hear, especially one of my favorite stories in that article, by the way, is of the Harrismith community, where they've taken over responsibilities for repairing the sewage. And in that one, it took one man essentially to be like, you know what, enough is enough. We cannot accept the conditions that we have been stuck in and that we have to live in. And the entire community followed. So essentially, I know all of us have frustrations in our communities. All it takes is literally one person to be like, you know what, this isn't the standard of the quality of life that we deserve. And therefore, we need to take it into our own hands instead of waiting for government to take for as long as they want to. So yeah, that would be my thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think role models and leaders are super important. Yeah, Tiago, your final thoughts on this issue?
Yeah, I was about to say that I think we are, as a country, in the crisis that we find ourselves in, due mainly to cadre deployment. We, in many instances, you have people running institutions, be it state-owned institutions, municipalities, departments, who are not qualified for positions that have been given to them. And in a lot of instances, what these people do, because they are not qualified and their future in those positions are not assured, are not insured in any way, they get in, start giving tenders to their friends and everything, so as to cue their pockets for the future and stuff. So really, it's cadre deployment that has gotten us into the crisis that we are in, and it's something that we must get rid of if we take seriously the project of rebuilding South Africa and restoring our institutions and getting service delivery right, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, it's ordinary communities that suffer at the hands of really abhorrent policies. And I think on that note, guys, you can find awesome articles like Tariq's and engaging videos at fanf-an.net, freedomadvocacy.net. And, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, as well as TikTok. So at Badger of Liberty, that's where you can find our stuff. And on that note, let's move on to something a little bit more lighthearted with this week's episode of Burning Questions with Mbali up next.
Hello and welcome to the light-hearted episode of Burning Questions. Hi Alex, how's Charlene? Hi Diego. You can all say hi back in, like a choir.
Hello, Mbali.
So guys, today we're talking about it's a little interesting what you guys were talking about, and we have a different view from one of our colleagues from Gabriel. and he was very kind to share his thoughts with us via a quote. So this is what his quote says. It's very interesting. Majority youth unemployment will persist as long as property rights are threatened by Gucci slinging, looting racial nationalists. Guys, I don't know how I feel about this quote. And as always, I always have a lot to say, but let's open it up. Let's start with Sholin. Sholin, Gucci slinging, looting racial nationalists. What do you think about this quote?
Yeah, so absolutely, I can't agree with Gabriel more. And in this quote, the Gucci slinging, looting, racial nationalists that he's referring to are the likes of some of our political elite, like the EFF and ANC, who pretend to be fighters for the people. Yet
Yay.
tend to walk around with the overalls in Parliament, but behind the scenes walk around with Gucci and Louis Vuitton and the latest Mercedes Benz, which is pretty ironic, in my opinion.
But drip is forever. Serving the
Drip is
people is
forever.
temporary,
Even for
Fixing
Malema.
potholes is temporary.
Even for Malema, drip is forever. You're right, Mbali.
Yeah, definitely. Alex, your thoughts before we go into the comments.
Yeah, I think what's important to acknowledge in Gabriel's quote is the idea of property rights. He says, property rights will remain threatened by, essentially race nationalists who want to nationalize the land, they want to nationalize the healthcare, they want to nationalize banks, they want to nationalize mines. So essentially what they want to do, and I think especially going on what we discussed earlier in Freedom FANatics, is that they want to take control away from people. And what we've just realized is that, people need more control over what is theirs.
Yeah.
So if people have ownership, they're more likely to take care of what's around them. And we can see that when the state owns and manages stuff, particularly in South Africa, and things fall apart. So I think Gabriel's spot on there.
Yeah, definitely. Diego, maybe let me have your thoughts there quickly.
Yeah, well, I was about to say that no one wants to invest in a country whereby property rights are shaky. You are not really sure where things stand in terms of property rights. So that's been part of the problem in South Africa. Investors are quite hesitant to invest in the South African economy, given all these conversations taking place around property rights. And most concerning is that the governing party, at its last policy conference, adopted land expropriation without compensation as a policy position that they would implement in government. So as an investor, you didn't want to invest in a country whereby you could put your money today, and wake up the next day with everything taken by the government and belonging to the government, including investments that you have made. So it's no surprise that unemployment keeps on rising, because really investors do not have confidence in the South African economy and how things are being carried out in the country. Sure.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Let's go to what the people think. People don't hesitate sharing what they think about our codes. It's very nice to see. So this one is from Sizwe, and Sizwe says, beneficiaries of apartheid systems, as much as they inherited assets illegally obtained by their forefathers, are guilty of inheriting stolen properties. Hey, man. Alex, go for it.
Damn.
That was weird. Okay, but yes, Alex, let's go.
No. That's it's a tough one. That's the problem with. It's frustrating with the conversation around property rights. I mean, it's fair enough that it gets drawn back to dispossession, land dispossession in the past, previous injustices, given our history of race-based oppression. But it just goes to show how important property rights are. So I think to kind of touch on what Sizwe is saying is I understand the problem is that the government has failed in its restorative justice project of land restitution. Restitution and redistribution are two different things. The whole land restitution process is flawed, and I think that's definitely something that people should hold the ANC government to account 100%. But I think what's important to recognize is what the government's intentions are. As Tiako mentions, with such adopting a policy, or at least the ANC adopting the policy and trying to put it through Parliament of expropriation, and vying for one of the proposals was for state custodianship. So ultimately, we just need to be very aware of government actions when it comes to property rights. And if the state owns everything, everyone loses. So then there'll be no restorative justice for everyone, and it's just going to perpetuate those forces that Sizwe points out.
Yeah, if I can add on to Alex's point, what we also saw is that although the intentions of it might be might appear good, as in we need to rectify an injustice of the past through going through this land reform process. Something that we need to be wary of is how it is done, because if we look at in Zimbabwe, when Robert Mugabe and his clique decided that we need to go on the land reform process, and it was not the ordinary Zimbabwean that actually benefited from this, but he instead prioritized giving land to one of his compatriots, the people around him. That's where he was actually focused on giving land. So that's why we need to be very careful when people come with promises, but they don't actually go through with what they say. So that would be a cause for concern.
Yeah, no, definitely. Let's go to the last comment from Kolekile, and this one just starts off randomly or weirdly. It says, yet we seem not to believe in restorative justice regarding property injustices of the past. ! Question mark. Diego, what are your thoughts there? Those are important,
Well, we have laws. We have government laws that are there to assist with restoring justice to those that an injustice was done upon in the past. But unfortunately, the government of the day has not been working hard enough to ensure that they do restore those properties back to their rightful owners in instances whereby land was indeed stolen. But I think the property issue is very complex. It would require a much lengthier conversation, given that my own belief is that we can't even look at, for example, land that we can't begin the conversation at the point whereby land was stolen by white people when they arrived in South Africa, and instances whereby land was stolen. Remember that not all land that white people occupy in South Africa or have occupied in South Africa was stolen land. Some of the land was vacant, some of the land was bought. Of course, some of the land was stolen. But as well, even before white people arrived in South Africa, there are instances whereby black people amongst themselves had stolen land from each other. And in an area like Ramalepo, here in Limpopo, you have Kgoshi Molepo, who's the king of Ramalepo. But if you go there and have conversations with elders in the community, they'll tell you that this is not the original king. Before this king, there was another king. These ones came through, fought that one, and took over the kingdom. So it's a very complex matter that must be analyzed thoroughly, and context is everything as well. You must analyze it looking at the past context as well, whereby conquering communities was the order of the day. One king conquering another king was the order of the day. That's how things were done. And it seems to be a shocking thing when white people came into South Africa and conquered black people, whereas it's something that has always been happening. Tribes always conquered each other. The issue seems that it's people of a different race who came and conquered.
Definitely. The color is now different.
Yeah, so if we are going to discuss this, I think we must start it at that very point and start with tribal wars, how land was stolen then, and come with it, white people and everything, understanding the context of what was the order of the day at the time. So we'll need a much lengthier discussion around this.
I'm ready. When can we schedule a history podcast, how the land was stolen? Sholan, do you have anything to say?
Yes, I wanted to add is that we've seen how the state or the government cannot even run a proper electricity supply, run proper water supply, get rid of our sewage, provide us with safety and security. Why would you trust them to manage land, a crucial, important
Bro.
part of our economy? If the economy is run our electricity, why would they be able to run our land?
I have no idea how we believe in them. But you know what? A little hope will never
I
kill
think another,
anyone.
and I think in addition, Mbali, another
Mm.
discussion we should perhaps have at a later stage is a very discussion around kings and why we have kings in a democracy. Some of these kings, like I said, came through taking over from other people through wars, fights, and everything. Surely, if we have kings in today's state, I should be able to go and kill the king of the Zulu people right now and take over from him and become a
Please.
king. If
I'm
in some
very
instances that's
tribalist.
how. No, well, I'm giving you this that
That
these
is a
people were
joke,
not
guys.
born. Kings were not born with this thing. Some of them took it over from someone. Surely, if it's
Yeah.
something that we're continuing with in a democracy, then I should be allowed right now to go and slaughter a king and take over their kingdom. If it's a system that we're continuing with and recognizing these people as official kings, they became official kings through killing. Surely we should be able to remove them from those seats through killing. But that's a discussion for another day. It does link with the
Not
discussion
through
we're having
killing,
now.
but
Property rights.
other ways.
Mbali,
We can remove them in other
But
ways.
it's how it happened.
if I can just add some fuel to that fire, I think
Yeah.
what's important that Tiejo points to is this debate has nuance. You can't just be ahistorical and look at it through one lens.
Yeah.
You've got to look at it through a tribal lens. You've got to look at it through African history lens. And also, that's the thing. I think you're mentioning like the tribal authorities. The idea of a title deed is not necessarily something that runs rampant through South Africa, but it is the essence of property ownership, especially when it comes to land. So I think it's also, I think it's a great precedent that's been set, and I think it's definitely a conversation that can be had. And I think that's really what you're just trying to do here at FAN is have these conversations. So I think it's awesome that we do get this feedback and we have such awesome engagement from our fans, especially on Facebook.
Yeah, from our fans. Get it? You guys get it? Okay. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for this discussion. And you at home, I hope you enjoyed it and you learned a thing or two from this episode. And do remember, your freedom is worth fighting for.